David Sinclair recently changed his longevity protocol. And the biggest change is not about what he added, it's about what he stopped taking. Metformin. And that one hit me differently because about a month ago, I started taking metformin. Not because I need another pill on the counter, but because I trusted the longevity case for it. And now, he's moving away from it.
So the question sitting right in front of us is not as a headline, but a real decision. I don't think the move here is to panic. I think the move is to ask better questions. Are we following the data or are we following the person? I think the answer is sitting right in front of you.
So Harvard-trained researcher and longevity purveyor David Sinclair is well known as being one of the foremost longevity experts in the world, and he is now changing his stack. So the question about this video is not about what is the new stack, it's about what happens when somebody who you trust changes the information that they're giving you, and now you have to adjust to it.
The list matters, but the reason the list changed matters more. If all we do is copy the newest version of someone else's protocol, we're always one update behind.
So we'll discuss what he added and what he dropped, but what we really need to understand was why something was added or why something was dropped. What problem was it supposed to solve in the first place? If you're building a longevity strategy, you absolutely have to understand that the list itself is not the lesson.
So before we talk about metformin, before we talk about aspirin or NMN or anything else, we need to understand the rules for this audit. We're not asking, what does David Sinclair take now? We're asking, what changed? Why did it change? What still holds up? And what would be a mistake to copy just because it came from someone smart? Because the goal is not to build David Sinclair's protocol. The goal is to make better decisions with our own.
So metformin is obviously the one that hit me the most. It was just a month ago that I started taking metformin based on trust that I put into experts like David Sinclair and Bryan Johnson, Peter Attia, Andrew Hubin, all these other people are talking about this, right? Now that Sinclair has moved away from it, the question isn't about is it good or is it bad? It's about what has changed enough to make someone rethink it. I'm not asking whether or not I got tricked. I'm asking whether the reason I started taking it still holds up.
Let's be clear, you did not just start taking metformin because these super smart longevity people are taking it, right? It's not some random internet supplement. It's a well-known medication. It's been around for a long time. It's connected to blood sugar and metabolic health, and it makes it feel a little bit more serious than all of the longevity hype.
Yeah, it's been around long enough, it's been tested well enough, and it's used by enough people that I felt comfortable adding it to my stack. I don't like taking medications if I don't need to. It's something that I'm very cautious to not allow these things to come into my body unless I have a real important reason for that.
Where I get tripped up is if exercise is one of the strongest longevity levers we have, and there's concern that metformin may blunt some of the benefits of exercise, then the question changes. It's not, does metformin do anything? It's, does it make sense for this person with this goal at this time? A compound can be useful in one context and questionable in another.
Yeah, so this is where I landed. I'm not in panic mode, but I'm also not pretending that it doesn't matter. I'm not going to be making any medical decisions based on a YouTube headline, that's for sure. But I am starting to question the reason I started. I kind of have to at this point, right? Because if I started taking metformin mainly because I trusted the longevity voices that made the case, and now those voices have changed, then I owe it to myself to go back and check the data.
Not the hype, not the personality, the data. That's the sanity filter. Before you copy the protocol, understand the reason behind the protocol.
But before we get into what still holds up in Sinclair's protocol, we're going to talk about the other things that he appears to have dropped. Metformin is one thing. It's a biohacker conversation, right? But this next one, this is kind of sitting in medicine cabinets all over the country. And it shows why familiar advice can sometimes be the hardest advice to question.
And this medicine cabinet item that we're talking about is baby aspirin. Way different than metformin, right? Metformin is biohacker and longevity, but baby aspirin is normal. It's part of everyday life, and people have taken it and talked about it for years.
Yeah, it's one that's passed down from generations, right? Baby aspirin in low doses equals heart protection, it thins the blood, seems generally harmless, but familiar doesn't always mean risk-free.
The science around daily aspirin for primary prevention has changed. For some people, the bleeding risk may outweigh the benefit. So when Sinclair drops baby aspirin, the question to ask is, how many things are we still doing because they used to sound like smart prevention? Some health habits don't look risky because they're so familiar.
This is the second sanity filter. Familiar doesn't always mean harmless, and old advice doesn't stay correct just because it used to be common. That doesn't mean that you can stop a medication because you saw a video, but it does mean that anything that affects your blood, your heart, your hormones, or your metabolism deserves a fresh conversation with your doctor. Not panic, not blind trust, but a fresh conversation.
So now you've heard about two things that Sinclair has moved away from, but let's talk about two things that have stayed. NMN and resveratrol are the core survivors of the Sinclair-style protocol. When someone changes the protocol, the things they keep are just as important as the things that they drop.
NMN and resveratrol, they've been central to Sinclair's conversation for years. They're tied to some of the bigger ideas that people associate with him, like NAD and cellular aging. And that's why people pay attention. But this is where we need to slow down. The theory and the mechanisms are interesting, and the data, the early data is very interesting, but it's not the same as proven human life extensions.
So do we treat these like proven longevity tools, or do we treat them like promising bets that still need more human evidence? Promising isn't the same as proven.
So this is where NMN and resveratrol land for us. Interesting? Absolutely. Worth understanding? Of course. But we wouldn't describe them as guaranteed years extra in your bottle, right? Like, that's a mistake. If you're buying them, you know what you're buying. You're not buying certainty. You're buying into a theory that still has more to prove in human history, right? And it doesn't make it useless. It just means that we have to be honest about the category.
That's actually why this whole thing started to feel so real for us. You didn't start Metformin because you read a headline. You started it because people like Sinclair made the longevity case. And then Bryan Johnson came along and made the whole thing feel testable. Like, okay, what would happen if a regular guy in his 50s stopped just sitting there and watching these protocols and actually started testing pieces of them in real life? And that's the rabbit hole that we open with Bryan Johnson.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that, but first we need to finish sorting out Sinclair's updated stack, because the next editions are where this gets even easier to overbuy.
This is the part of the protocol where a normal person can go from curious to $150 deeper into supplements.
Yeah, that's like a monthly charge.
We've talked about what Sinclair appears to have dropped. We've talked about what survived. Now we need to talk about what got added. And this is where discipline matters. This is where interesting turns into expensive.
Sinclair seems to have added 3 new elements to his stack: taurine, fisetin, and alpha lipoic acid. Not things that we're completely familiar with yet, but we are going to learn more about them for our longevity journey, and we'll of course be sure to share that with you as we go.
Let's talk about the potential buying trap. Taurine sounds easy to be curious about. Fisetin sounds exciting because the pitch is basically clearing out old damaged cells. Like, who wouldn't want that?
Great.
Alpha lipoic acid sounds less flashy, but it's more practical. And that's the problem. All 3 of these sound interesting for different reasons. But interesting is not the same as it belongs in my body.
So we're not looking at these new additions like a shopping list. We're looking at them as questions. Taurine makes us ask, is this interesting enough to track? Probably yes, for sure tracking, right? Fisetin makes us ask, is it too early to treat this like a normal household protocol? Alpha lipoic acid makes us ask, is this solving a real problem for us, or does it just sound like a smart thing to add? That's the filter. New doesn't equal necessary, and interesting doesn't necessarily mean urgent. If I can't explain what problem a supplement is solving for me, it doesn't belong in my stack yet.
So now we can answer the question we started with. Are we following the data, or are we just following the person? And for us, the honest answer is sometimes both.
That's the uncomfortable part. I started paying attention to metformin because the people that we trust made a really strong case for it. Does that make us foolish? I don't think so. I think it just makes us human. Most of us don't have the time to read every single study, track every trial, and rebuild every health decision from scratch.
So we use trust. We listen to people who seem smart. We follow the breadcrumbs, and sometimes that's how we find really useful ideas. But trust can't be the finish line. It can only be the starting point. Because if the person you trust updates their thinking and you don't update yours, then you're not following the data anymore.
Yeah, you're following an old version of someone else's confidence. And that's the real lesson from Sinclair's updated protocol. It's not that metformin is good or metformin is bad, or that NMN is proven or unproven. The lesson should be that a longevity stack should be allowed to change.
The question isn't, what does David Sinclair take now? The question is, what still makes sense for me? With my body, my doctor, my goals, and the evidence we have right now. That's the filter. Learn from smart people, but don't outsource your judgment to them. Because the goal isn't to become a copy of David Sinclair. The goal is to become a better owner of your own health.
Here's the part that I keep coming back to. Being on a longevity journey can often make you feel like you're just behind. Someone has a better protocol, a cleaner stack, a newer study, there's a better doctor, a better lab panel, a better version of discipline, and if you're not careful, you can spend your whole health journey just trying to catch up to someone else's life.
But that's not ownership. That's comparison with a supplement budget. The real win isn't copying from the smartest person in the room. The real win is becoming harder to fool, harder to scare, harder to sell to, and more willing to ask, does this actually make sense for me?
That's what we want for the worldwide tribe. Not blind trust, not constant panic, obviously, and not a cabinet full of things that you can't explain. Just better questions, better decisions, and a health plan that actually belongs to you. So earlier I said metformin didn't become real for me because of one headline. It became real because people like Sinclair made this longevity case. And then Bryan Johnson came along and he made the whole thing feel like something you could actually test. So we did. Not as billionaires, we're definitely not that, and not as a full medical team, but as a regular couple, 50, approaching 50, trying to figure out what happens when you stop watching these protocols from the outside and start testing them in real life.
That's what our Bryan Johnson Blueprint series is really about. And if you find yourself asking those same questions, watch that series next.